Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying back, everybody, leaving your spirits with us. Very grateful. Jokes aside, no, thank you all very much. I think it's been a very long day. It's been a really enriching day, I would say. And I think the presentations and the sessions we've had, I think for me, and I don't know if you agree, Ushmita, what we intended and what we set out to do, I think was very clearly illustrated through examples and through case studies and through experiences of the speakers and participants. Given that it's the end of the day, I think we've made an executive decision to dovetail the last two sessions, so this and the following session. So I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Chakravarti, if you don't mind being in our midst, or would you like to be at the dais?
Same thing.
Okay.
I don't think...
Any comments from the audience? Any preferences?
Wants to come back?
The same audience and the speakers are the same.
Okay, I'm going to hand the floor to Dr. Chakravarti to give us a summation, after which we'll have a discussion.
As you can see, if you sum up 2 days of discussion in 25 minutes, and there is no audience to interact with, it will not be much of a session. But then, nor would there be any time to share experiences about each of the domains which have been discussed. But then, through the entire discussion, I found there was one steady refrain that about the failure of the state and failure of public policy. At the same time, I also witnessed there was a celebration of individual initiatives. So if the state is disempowered or has disempowered itself, individuals have empowered themselves. So we have both the, but then having administered public policy all my life, I have never felt this problem. I mean, I have always found it possible to empower myself within the policy framework without going to the state government, without going to anybody, or without asking for support from this department or that department. So I would say that there should not be any such sense of disablement. For instance, I mean, when the state was being discussed, there was a general discussion about, the Department of Culture being purblind. Now, the Department of Culture, the first failure is there, that culture is not a matter for the Department of Culture. It is a matter for all departments of government, and culture is a component in all departments of government, and that is also recognized in the different departments separately, that there is a culture of water management, there is a culture of human resource management, there is a culture of forestry and environment, but that is somehow not realized by individual, people who are policymakers. But so far as I am concerned, I handled museums, I also handled the state policies, and I always found it possible even to work through the museum for bringing the entire government in and administering all those policies independently of the government without any stress or any problem at all. So the design of governance ultimately is to the extent you are able to empower yourself, and it is not really a hole in public policy so much as a hole in the lack of initiative in individual performers. So that being said, I mean, I would also say that this discussion of design and art history. I remember Kumaraswamy was being discussed. Kumaraswamy had clearly said that this in terms of art history, that there is a loss of senescence, there is a loss of attention, shithila samadhittam, as you would call it, how he describes the movement from, classical art to medieval art. There is a sense of, decrepitude, there is a sense of desiccation, etc., etc. So we won't go into that because that would be a long, historical analysis. But what I would try to point out is that in the same way, I think the different state machineries also have been overcome by this senescence and sense of decrepitude. And individuals, who are there, they don't empower themselves. This is my firm conclusion because I have never found this to be any hindrance anywhere. There was a discussion about intellectual property right, etc. And again, one knows that, what is in the laboratory and what is in the lap of nature. Bridges need to be built. But again, this GATT regime, etc., that ultimately whatever is electronically fixed is has a claim to recognition, and what is not fixed, what is unfixed knowledge, it doesn't have claim to recognition. Even that can be easily overcome. We easily did it in forestry and environment. By moving from fiscal to non-fiscal forestry, from major to minor forest produce, by introducing our own system of third-party assurance and bioactive characterization, and instead of going to Oxford and international agencies for recognition of our community IPR regime. In the same way, there was this problem of this digital thing. Digitization. As all this chromo keying and paper ghost editing and BR, XR, etc. Basically it is replacing the real by the virtual, but it is not necessary to displace the real by the virtual at all. It is always possible to enhance the real with the virtual, and that I am doing on a large scale in the different museums of the country. And there is total cooperation from the different state agencies and the different people who are in the museum field. So I don't think that is a constraint. And then in the same way, for instance, in design and environment, all these question of plastic and microplastic, and plastic being consumed by the fish and the flora and the fauna and coming back to human food, etc. Reuse, recycle, reduce, etc. All this is being, again, it is, there is a necessity for intervention here, but I am quite sure that here the larger picture is being missed because, for instance, the Bengal Delta. The Bengal Delta is firmly connected with the Himalayan system and with the ocean. So if it is seen in isolation and for, to recovery of the waters or for, rebuilding the landscape, that will be quite improper because one has to do it in a reach to valley approach, and there is already national aquifer planning and monitoring, so one can use it without any difficulty, and so that is also possible. Then there is this question of, I found that everywhere the temples are being discussed, music was also discussed, but what is not being discussed is the tradition in the modern design. For instance, if you look at Kandariya Mahadeva temple, there is a firm tradition there of ascent and descent, acceleration and deceleration. From ahata to anahata and back. So that is a kind of an orchestration of the architecture, the different bhumis with the shrutis in music. And Uddhat Chanda and Talat Chanda. So that is elaborately discussed in many texts, including the Hindu temple by Stella Kramrisch and other cultural geographers and historians. So it is necessary to remind the people about all this. Then there is this question of indigeneity, and there have been all kinds of declarations, Suva, Matatua, Jula and Bul, etc., which have gone into this in elaborate detail. And these declarations always talk about culturally based harm. And the culturally based harm also has been discussed in Australia in this, in connection with the World Peace, how the culturally based harm was coming in through imitation of rock art designs in the shirts. And that went to the court, and they won in the court, the indigenous groups. And then there is the question of restitution. So one was also discussing, we are discussing about cultural restitution. I mean, even in the United States, I mean, the American Native, Grave Goods Act, etc., has a recognized reputation, and there is large-scale cultural restitution of properties. But what is important is that in this entire discussion, I mean, if we do not, look at the macro environment along with the micro environment, we shall miss the SDG goals totally, because the SDG goals ultimately speak of convergence, and it also speaks of partnership in the 17th goal. And that partnership is between, individuals and corporate groups, and between, that is also possible to organize without any real problem. It is true that the ministries of culture are manned by people who have nothing to do with culture. I mean, they are, it is also true that in the different departments of government, there are no people who are culturally aware. But anybody who is culturally aware can easily, use these ministries for their purpose. And I have found it, have not found it difficult at all. Being in a museum, we were doing it all the way. I mean, going out to remote parts of the state and the country, and working with them on sacred groves. We did an international sacred grove festival with Southeast Asia, etc. Then we did a Hazo festival where we looked at the cultural confluence and the religious confluence. We did a workshop with 7 Himalayan countries, and there also we had no problem in interacting with any of these countries. And all these, BIMSTEC and SARC and other agreements which are there in the field, they are seen from the point of view of military competition, I mean, etc. But they are not seen from the point of view of cooperation and collaboration. If one just reverses the gaze, it is possible to utilize the same agreements for cooperation and advancement. So ultimately, this Bay of Bengal interaction sphere, I mean, we are only talking about this at this particular point of time. It's an interaction sphere between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. And there is also a history of Austronesian dispersal. I mean, from the Sumba Island in Indonesia to Australia, how, it was possible to create a boat with local material and go all the way. So that was demonstrated by a Pleistocene seafaring expedition. So all this is part of history, and we should not look at it with a monolinear vision, but as a multilinear and parallel development, I mean, in terms of culture. And they all come together, the picture comes together, and it is possible to do all this within the framework of existing policy, not wait for the entire structure to change, which will never happen. And I mean, just to give one illustration, you see, when one talks about, the museum, for instance. Now, I mean, museum is supposed to be displaying objects. I said, no, this museum, you have a new museum movement, so we shall display ideas. Museum is only considered tangible. No, the tangible content is animated by the intangible content. Museum is not concerned with the field, I mean, not with river valley cultures, not with, coastal cultures. I said, no, it is always possible to go and work with them. And we went out with them and worked with these communities, and they were completely cooperative. And there are hundreds of instances which I can recall. And there was, initially the Secretary, Ministry of Culture was doubtful. He said, Kalyan, I have been told that you are moving away from the policy. I said, no, you look at the charter. This is what it says. New museum movement, community museum movement, that it should work in the field for in-situ revitalization, etc. So I see, okay, go ahead, please. We won't come in the way. So I have an impression that it is a question like the individual groups have shown, that they have empowered themselves. So in the same way, it is policy. It is possible for, you see practitioners of these public policy instruments to handle it on their own. There is a question whether one should combine, the market mechanism with the command and control mechanism. Certainly, there is a need for that to combine both for pollution control. But if one goes on looking at the pollution control board to bring it on all into line is not appropriate. You see all these counter magnet cities. I mean, we are talking about aesthetics also. And you see these pencil-like structures with cold surfaces coming up on the riverfront all over Calcutta. And as against that, there's outstanding examples of indigenous experiments like Tonghor, for instance. I mean, nobody spoke about the Apatanis. I mean, they have brought pisciculture, aquaculture, sewage disposal culture, fecal sewage, etc., management of the sectoral groves, and self-governance mechanisms into convergence. And I have gone and worked with them at Zero, and it was wonderful. They were doing it already. Similarly, gender has been missed. The gender aspect of development has to be understood. I mean, I have come across experiments like the Irma Kaithal, the women's markets in Manipur. Then you see these Irma Kaithal, and then Turi Hatri in Chhattisgarh, and then come across experiments like the backyard, farmyard tenure compost management in Jivida Hasa in Jharkhand, and then also in Naroa, Garoa, Gurua, Bari in Chhattisgarh. And they're totally successful, and they are doing it, and we have gone down to the spot, and we have seen that the women have empowered themselves, and they're able to do it within the framework. I mean, and the soil, water, climate, I mean, they have all brought it into convergence, and they have applied their knowledge about the field with great effectiveness. So I have an impression that it is a question ultimately of empowering ourselves.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Would anybody like to comment? I think Aditya ji.
Not defending the state, but then let me say that we do care. Yeah. So recently, like since I have joined, KCC itself, like I will tell you one example. We came up with the mandate, like there is a International Museum Day on 18th of May, which is celebrated all around the globe. And UNESCO come up with this idea. ICOM and ICROM, two body, like 155 countries part of it, private government museums celebrated. So 1200, I myself appointed as nodal officer, wrote to 1200 museums, and then the whole culture ministry team set, and then it was decided for the acceptance, and in the Bharat Mandapam, hall number 5 was selected. All the space went for free, but it was on merit. KCC was also part of it. Pradhan Mantri ji came, inaugurated it, but then being part of it, again I am saying the mandate was not to make profit out of it, and that's the Lakshman Rekha. So one has to go by the theme of what is there in the mandate. But while working, we have experienced the space given to not only KCC, but like at least 120 museums and lot of other cultural body came. providing them space and facilitating them with lot of things. We also learnt a lot, and probably the magic will happen again this time at like Mahatma Mandir. We will be seeking time from Pradhan Mantri ji again, and everything will be for free, like even the space and things, everything facilitation will be free. It is like once we will be done with all these, like there are certain more programs. Culture Ministry just tomorrow there is creative economy. It will be showcased on the Rajpath on the Republic Day parade. The tableau is already created. So they are like, certainly they are doing a lot. It is taking time, and probably with the wisdom of and the scholarship of lot of people like you, like it is the flame which will keep burning, and probably things will change. So this is a hope, and that is what I wish to say. Yeah.
Professor Chatterjee, would you like to comment?
I don't think I have much to say on this issue. I just hope that the sector that we're talking about is hopefully not going to become a command and control sector. It is, as was saying, it is the question of the agendas for change should come from below, and government should be the facilitating issue. One knows that there is a need for a government structure, both at the central and the state level, which understands broad issues of policy. It's not an easy business to work with the government system, so I don't think that we can deny the enormous struggle that civil society faces, including perhaps never before as now, the open hostility of the government to very many of those who work in civil society. But things hopefully will change, and where I agree that our job is to look for partnerships, to look for those places where we can work together. It's not as if the private sector or the civil society sector are all saints, we are not. So there are a lot that we have to do to improve our own system. But in this area of culture and art, which has taken up the last couple of days, the policy environment, as we've just heard, has got the raw material for change. The challenge for all of us is to use that raw material creatively, and I hope that we can do it. I think this institution that we are sitting in is a good example of private initiative, maybe also of corporate initiative, right? So I think we all need to come together as partners and as equals. And as equals, I underline that, because in a democracy, the purpose of the government is to serve. And the purpose of private individuals and of civil society is to serve a larger purpose than mere either profit-making or anything like that. So I think we have to go back to the beginning. We have to go back to the vision of our founding fathers, because they understood this, and we have to bring it back. In the present issue, present climate of what we are facing, climate change, the enormous shifts that are taking place in the politics of the world, we're really going to have to find our center and be able to hold on to that, because the shifts are so huge that often we feel powerless, that we can't do anything to change it. But that's where the importance of conferences and seminars like this is, that we find partnerships and we find strength in each other, government, civil society, NGOs, and industry. So I think there's a lot of work ahead for us, and we've had some good examples of what can be done during these 2 days.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think something that hasn't really been spoken about at all is the role of the judiciary and legislation, right? And as somebody who's working a lot with technology. I think one of the problems, and this is by no means restricted to India alone, is that we're constantly playing a game of catch-up when it comes to regulation of things like AI, etc., right? And so, for example, what you were talking about, say, third-party assurance and the relationship that has with intellectual property, I think the problem is that even if that is to be resolved, it will immediately be replaced by the dangers posed by AI. So I think that's always going to be an issue. And I think, kind of in our very limited capacity of working with the state, I think what we find is actually not so much not even a reluctance on the part of the state, but a lack of enforcement. So, and I'll give an example here. So we work with the disability commissioners to implement certain mandates. So say, making a park accessible, etc. And even if the disability commissioner says, sends down an order saying, yes, this should happen, etc., then the rubber never touches the ground. And I think that for us, that gap is really difficult because we really don't know at that point where to go because it's already been through the courts. And I think that for me is something that we come up again, time and time and again, that there might be, and definitely individual actors who are helpful and are wanting to do the right thing. But short of, and I think this is very unfortunate, short of penalizing, right, kind of saying that, say a corporation should be penalized for polluting or, etc. There's no middle ground. And I think that is very unfortunate that it has to go to that kind of extent. But on the other hand, we don't see any action unless that happens. And I think that is something that I think many of us in civil society are constantly trying to negotiate and navigate that. How do we, and also we know the judicial system is overwhelmed and it's a huge country. And I think there's a lot of this is a frustration of just the scale that we're forced to operate at. But I think that for me is one of the things that I think it would be helpful for us to kind of think about the state as maybe kind of pushing those processes forward with a bit more force sometimes, rather than kind of always expecting civil society to step up because there are so many things that have to be resolved and there's limited time and limited bandwidth and limited energy as well. So, yeah.
Vikasji, in relation to FICCI's efforts to create a cultural policy framework, very ambitious. I think what I'm getting from everybody, it seems like an impossible task. And in the break, you mentioned that the kind of churn of bureaucrats in ministries and at a ministerial level sort of really impedes that kind of longer term thinking and strategic thinking that seems to be required. And it seems to be that everybody is really asking for.
See, I'm a very hopeful person. So I talk about data, not to bring any despair or any discouragement among yourself. Just we need to have those data so we can accelerate ourselves. So again, quoting a smaller data, it just came to my mind, tourism and all. So India's tourism into 2023 stood at 6.9 million. And Louvre Museum visitorship is 9 million. You can say, somebody can just claim, okay, that's one of the best museum and Paris is the city where people go for Louvre only. But you talk about the Prado in Spain, it's a small, not so big, and again 2.8 million annual visitor. And I don't want, yeah, it's international.
Please don't forget the largest tourism sector is domestic tourism.
Yeah. So there I don't quote data of our museum. Otherwise, yeah. So because I worked in the museum, so I understand the pain of museums. So that's why I always ask people to come forward, share the problem, challenge them. So at least we should know the challenges. We should work on that based on those stats and data. And then only we can produce as the government to do some changes. So just talking about the creative economy and the culture patronage. So we don't want culture to be only patronized by the royalty and estates. We want it as a business. Otherwise, these people sitting at the young crowd, they won't be sitting here. They won't take up it as a career. पैसा ही नहीं आएगा, काम ही नहीं होगा तो क्या करना है इसका? Nobody is going to go to state for the patronage, or nobody is going to become the legend like Bismillah Khan or Amjad Ali Khan or Zakir Hussain. They have to have some kind of career growth in there. So even for my practice and tenure, when I joined the School of Arts and Science in JNU in 2004, I was one of the earliest batch there. And I'm from Bihar. I came to Delhi to prepare for UPSC. So I was a comparatively brighter student in my zone, wherever I belong to. So my father and the parents hopefully sent me to Delhi to go prepare for UPSC. I came here and got trapped in JNU for this visual arts thing. And I joined this arts and aesthetics, and when I told my father, so I have taken admission in Masters Arts and Aesthetics. And he was a mathematician guy. He works in the Secretariat Finance Department. So he used to tell his colleagues and the society that he is studying statistics.
It's a great euphemism.
Yeah. Because he was willing that, okay, maybe he's lost his path or I don't know what, but he was not able to digest it. So he said, okay, he's studying statistics. So for 2 years during my master's, okay, this became only a statistic for him. But slowly we carved the path, or maybe there were slowly when we moved towards paths we were carved. And we started writing, our names used to appear in the articles on newspapers and here and there, and the state government started recognizing and giving award. Then only he disclosed. People actually knew, and then he disclosed, okay, he studied arts there and is a writer also. So that's the irony we have actually faced 15 years, 20 years ago. So we always think I used to teach at colleges, in College of Art and other places. So there I go and I see and interact with the students. I understand their problem. Many of the places, when we go and interact with the BFA students, in very first lecture when I asked somebody in my class, there were 20 students in my class that day, I asked, can you name the 5 contemporary artists of India? Unfortunately, some of them have just asked the Subodh Gupta and one more names kind of that. So then I felt that the system actually needs revival. We actually need to work on it. And it's not the fault of the students. It's the people like us and people beyond us kind of. So the entire system has to work based on the data. I mean to say, you have to have those things in place, then only you would be able to see that and be hopeful. Sir has worked for years in this domain. Yeah, decades. I have worked for years. I can't just leave it like that, okay, nothing is going to change, so we won't work in this. Because we have to hand it over to them and they have to continue.
Thank you, Vikasji. Would you like to say a comment? I mean, I think from the perspective of your own work, I mean, in relation to the Durga Puja.
I think we are, I'm going to be positive again, try to be, and from the beginning only, I have personally tried to initiate several public art festivals all over Northeast and these things. It came from me, but also there was some kind of a government. I would finally have to approach the governments. And in certain sectors like Sikkim or Nagaland or Meghalaya, they were keen. They had to be shown, a different path. And with a pinch of salt or whatever, with some kind of, not conflict, with some kind of this thing, they agreed upon. And otherwise, I'm an outsider, right? So I was allowed to work with them and probably create the first of its kind in those spaces. So it's a kind of negotiation I think we need to always work on. Also, COVID was very interesting. COVID times were very interesting in the sense that, at that time we started rethinking about certain things like we came up with this, I was part of this huge project which we call Virtual Kolkata Partition Museum, where without any state or central funding, a bunch of us historians, oral historians, architects, we came together and we created a repository of works which you can see online. And KPM, which was also, they had shown something in Imami long time back, much before COVID. But then we thought, we don't have to always go to the state or center. Punjab is doing great. There is the Partition Museum, but there's nothing here on this side. So we did it. So it was these dialogues in the civil society sometimes, I think, that also gives us a lot of energy to even think and sitting here, because of these things. Thank you.
Yes.
See, one important dimension of, Durga Puja presentation was, this neighborhood concept. The loss of the neighborhood is also part of the algorithmic violence. Because what is happening is, replacement of functional spaces, neighborhood districts, walkways, precincts, by uniform visual, order. And that has happened historically. From the time of Napoleon III, with reconnaissance militaire, and trying to control insurrectionary spaces by controlling everything, by hypotomy greed, etc. So it's a historical development, and there is the element of the statism there. And that is where, Professor Chatterjee's observation about, this Mehbubul Haq, the Human Development Report, and even, Gandhiji's, 7 radical sins, and the Swaraj of ideas rather than mere political Swaraj. Real autonomy rather than heteronomy. And also, this aspect of self-empowerment through working for economic and political liberation, like the national budget of happiness, which the Bhutan government issues every now and then, and rather than a national budget based on accounting policies. It's a social rate of return, not an economic rate of return, which they are looking for. And that's why they have preserved their biocultural diversity so well. So it is important, to have this convergence, among these conversations, to build up a policy framework for us. After all, KCC also is a venue where people have come together, and there is a luminous convergence of, so in terms of, skill development, for instance, I have been working with that also, and I have found that all that the skill development ministry does is to, there are universities which have been created, skill universities. What they're doing is to train villagers and rural youth for urban employment, and that market is very restricted. So they are neither able to come back nor able to get absorbed there. So instead of, developing a resource base for absorption of the skills locally within the village, this is what is happening. So there is a need, to work in that area. And there also we worked with, these forest-based women's cooperatives. And we found it was easy. Because all these women's cooperatives, they empowered themselves. They created skill-based, products, of cosmetics, of, textiles, and then all we did was to play a catalytic role of ensuring that they get a market. So now that is important, that that somebody plays a catalytic role and somebody doesn't. So it is very important that the reversal of policy is introduced at the grassroots. Through collective self-empowerment, like these people are doing, some of these people who made the presentations.
Thank you, sir. I want to come to you, Jill, as an artist. I think we're talking today a lot about policy. And as a practitioner, I think, it'll be really interesting to hear what you think,
So my take on that would be like, whatever through the years we have studied in institute like Vishwabharati, how Tagore had his vision of, and after Nandalal Bose became the principal of Kala Bhavan, he introduced the local arts and crafts into the mainstream of the practice, and how we were also being guided and made to study and directly linked to the crafts and the design and art in all forms of life, which made most of us like, even if our artwork is at some point of time not selling, we can make our own earning a bit from that. And I remember some anecdote from some of our teachers that they used to discuss that when Nandalal Bose was in charge as a principal, he asked the students to visit every villages nearby their home during the summer vacation and puja vacation, and like collect crafts from different local places. And through this, they built the archive of the Nandan Museum, and they also got to know about the different traditions local by. So this kind of pedagogic systems should be like more seriously like introduced into other colleges as well. I think so.
Thank you. Ushmita, I think we're almost drawing to an end, and I would like to thank everybody, and especially thank you and KCC, Richa, and the entire team for continuing this platform and for this opportunity for us all to come together. I've been part of this for the last 5 editions. This is my 6th edition, but I really feel that we're starting. It does take time, but we're starting to get to a place with VK, which I think is really addressing real world problems, because I think that what is now needed is these partnerships, this coordination, these collaborations, these discussions, but not discussions for discussing's sake, but that how do we, use these kinds of platforms, these kinds of spaces, and the resources, the amazing amount of resources and planning that goes into something like this. It's not a small thing. And, for a trust and for an institution like this to provide this space and opportunity for us all to come together, I just want to really thank you for the support and the belief in getting us here. But I think the question that really comes to mind now as we're drawing to an end, these 2 days, where do we go from here, right? What are the next steps? We're already planning, we're already thinking about our next edition of VK. We've got some dates in mind towards the end of this year. We were supposed to be in November. We had to postpone. So we're thinking of the 7th edition already. But I'm thinking more on the scale of, how do we take this opportunity and how do we build on it? So I want to leave with that thought, and I'd like you to perhaps close out the conference.
Thank you, Shwetal. And before I comment on the question and share my thoughts, I would like to thank each and every one of you, the speakers who came and who shared, who maybe are not present here today, but who shared their invaluable experiences. We have spoken about tangible and intangible information, knowledge, systems. And I think that is the thing that I take back, because yes, KCC is I think a unique organization. It is of course a CSR funded project. It is a gift back to the city which gave the family its starting point. However, a building and infrastructure and the funding is just that if it does not include thoughts, voices from people who have worked on the ground. And over the years, I think KCC has been really become a source where people converge and want to share their things and share their thoughts. I have been now on board in this organization for 5 years. I joined during the pandemic. And it's not been an easy journey. even though the infrastructure was there, even though the building was there, it wasn't easy to convince people that here is a space, think of it as your own, come, propose things, come and have a dialogue. We learn from it. For every project or every program, every exhibition that we do, we learn and we build. Maybe sometimes we make mistakes. And as Professor Chatterjee was telling me earlier today about his Jawaja project book, that this book is by the makers and it is full of a lot of mistakes and a few success stories. So what people see sometimes are the success stories in what we do, but believe you me that there are a lot of problems, mistakes that we learn from. And we don't stop where we have made mistakes. We regroup, we realign, sometimes step sidewards. I think that is the only way forward, and what has given us the courage to have these kind of dialogues, because we are not here to just hear everybody agree. We are also here to hear dissent. I think that is very important for us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.